Welcome to Reading by Candlelight at Molly's Cottage, where we proudly celebrate and promote new Australian authors and their stories. I'm Fiona Taylor, host of Reading by Candlelight, a community of readers brought together by Molly, founder and owner of Molly's Cottage, a sustainable gifting business. Molly's Cottage offer a monthly book box promoting a debut or emerging Australian writer, and their book is accompanied by selected local products complementing the novel's setting or protagonist. We hope that you enjoyed this month's chat with our Reading by Candlelight book box author. Welcome, Rae Cairns, to Reading by Candlelight at Molly's Cottage.
Thanks so much for having me here. It's an absolute thrill.
It is so lovely to have you here to talk about your exciting new thriller, Dying to Know, with that gorgeous cover.
I love the cover. I'm so pleased with it.
It's great. It's such a wonderful representation of what the book is actually about. Yeah. I think that you really got lucky with that one.
Yes, absolutely. I'm very grateful to Andy Warren, who designed it, and HarperCollins Design. They really did. They nailed the story in the cover, which was fantastic.
That's fabulous. Before we start, I'd just like to acknowledge that I'm on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and I pay respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. Here at Molly's Cottage and Reading by Candlelight, we're all about celebrating new voices, so I add my appreciation of Aboriginal stories handed down for generations. Now, Rae Cairns is the author of 2 exciting thrillers, and her first book, The Good Mother, was shortlisted for Best Debut Crime Fiction in the Ned Kelly Awards and longlisted for the Sisters in Crime David Awards. And I loved this book, Rae, but I think you have really stepped it up with Dying to Know.
Oh, wow. Thank you.
Your debut was excellent. This is next level. I think that you've got this fearless and fascinating protagonist in Geneva Layton. Fabulous name, by the way.
It's a fun thing, choosing names.
It just sounds like, she sounds like a spy. Geneva Layton.
Just running through the hills. She's funny. No, she's great. I love Geneva. She's a great character.
And the story is as fast-paced as the motorcycles she rides. I got that in there. I just love the motorcycles. I loved everything about that. Now, this is a story with something for everyone. There's a cold case, there's a family coming apart, a bit of romance, and a twisty mystery, all with thrilling action. Congratulations.
Oh, thanks so much. Thank you, Fiona. It's interesting when you put book 2 out, because it's a very different experience than book 1. So to have it so warmly received means a lot. Yeah.
Now, remember when we were spoiler free at Reading by Candlelight? Can you give us an elevator pitch for Dying to Know?
Yes, it's a standalone thriller set in Sydney. It opens with budding journalist Geneva Layton receiving a phone call that changes the entire course of her life. Her terrified sister Amber is on the line. She's trapped in the boot of a moving car. She has no idea who her abductor is, and she's begging Geneva for help. And then the line drops out. So while the police search for Amber, Geneva's days are filled with taking care of her very young niece and nephew. So when, and then kind of the days turn into weeks, turn into months, turn into years. So when shocking new evidence emerges, Geneva becomes desperate for answers. But to get them, she's going to have to take on the political power of a brother-in-law's family, the muscle of a motorcycle gang, and the questionable support of a policeman who betrayed her in the first month of the investigation. And the closer she gets to the truth, the more danger she's in.
How can anyone hear any of that and not want to read it? So good. And I think that that it's a certain storyline that makes this feel very different to many domestic thrillers out there. I think that readers will understand that once they get to the end, because we don't do spoilers. But I feel very much that it was putting an ordinary person into extraordinary circumstances and then follow them along. And we follow her along quite closely. So what I want to know is, what made you decide to write this story?
I knew I wanted to write about belonging, the power of belonging, and I wanted to explore it in a number of different ways. And then I watched a young woman talk about her brother going missing and the impact that had on both her and her family, and how it totally upended her life. And that really struck me as something that I hadn't seen explored that much, the impact on the people left behind, as opposed to the actual person who's been kidnapped. And the impact on the police, and the impact on the kids and her mother and and her sister and everyone around her. So that really started my brain ticking. And I knew that I could thread belonging and issues, family issues, through that. And then I don't know, I've got an overactive imagination. So we were driving to an event, and we were behind an old style Camry, and they had the old style boot. And I don't know, all of a sudden I was just overwhelmed with this thought of, what if someone is in the back of that car? What if they're stuck in the boot? Can you get out? What would they do? They're traveling. Could they get out? Let anybody know they were in there? And so that kind of combined with the first idea, and I knew I had an opening to a story, but I knew that I wanted to, I did a ton of research then, and but that was the initial idea, came from that.
Fabulous, just following behind a Camry and going, what have you in the boot?
Yeah, and I knew I wanted to do motorbikes as well, because my husband had just started riding a motorbike, and we'd met kind of, just the culture of it was so different from what I expected. It was people from all walks of life. And so, I knew I wanted to kind of explore that, but I also knew that the outlaw motorbike scene had had a very serious effect on innocent people, like from way back in the 80s with the Milperra massacre in Sydney, and the Sydney airport brawl much later. And so I kind of knew there were a whole load of layers that I would be able to dip into.
Fabulous. Now, how soon after The Good Mother did you start writing Dying to Know?
Well, so The Good Mother in total, with its 1,000,001 edits, took about 5 years. And this one was about a year. So I was contracted to write the second one. I had the idea, I had done some research, but when I dug it, it was kind of, there was a crossover between when I was editing for HarperCollins on The Good Mother, and I was also writing Dying to Know.
Excellent. I've heard from many people that the second one's so much faster because you know what you're doing now.
You do, and if you're under contract, like that deadline just screams at you from a distance, or closer and closer. But I like working to a deadline, and there is a sense of you've got a better idea of what you're doing, but then you also have that critical little monkey sitting on your shoulder going, you can't do this, it was a fluke first time around. So you've kind of got both, and you don't know what you don't know when you're writing the first one. Whereas the second one, you're just kind of going, but if I do that and I do this. So I just had to learn to shut that critic up, and just get that, particularly in the first draft, just get it down.
Well, the first one definitely was not a fluke.
Thank you.
Tell that monkey. No, it's interesting what you say about research, because how much research did you need to do for this? Because it's no spoiler that there are a lot of references to motorbikes and biker culture throughout the book. And I found that fascinating because I didn't know anything really about it. And for me, it gave a more unique reading experience. So did you have to do a lot of research?
Yeah, look, I love research. It's my absolute passion. And I can go down every little rabbit hole you can imagine. And I allow myself to do that. So with the motorbikes, and first thing I did was I read a ton of biographies from both the police perspective and the gangs perspective, particularly on the outlaw motorbike scene and how it's changed and how it evolved, particularly in Australia. And then I talked my husband into hanging out with me at motorbike haunts, and I would strike up a conversation with anybody that would talk to me. So we went to, there are kind of pit stop cafes, there are pubs that are renowned for people hanging out, motorbike, like the shops where you buy a lot of the really kind of the gear that's very much part of the culture. And I just hung out and talked to anyone that would give me the time of day. And that was people who are weekend bikers like us, through to people who are very serious and lived the day-to-day life, through to people who dip their toe in the outlaw biker scene. And then I struck gold when I got the opportunity to talk to an ex-Rebels bikie gang member. And he shared so much with me, and kind of through from why he believed in the outlaw motorcycle scene, why he wanted to live on the fringes of society, what day-to-day life was like, the structure of it, women in motorbiking. It was just this incredible gem of a conversation that gave me this really, it allowed me to really add color to the story in a very authentic way, which I was so thrilled about. He did invite me to a biker party. I didn't go. Although my husband loves to tell everyone she thought about it for a minute, because I'd have loved to have been a fly on the wall for that. He described them to me, but I would have loved to have seen one. And then to balance that up, I spent a day shadowing a youth policeman out at a police citizens youth club out west in Sydney, and spent the day just kind of asking him the same questions. Why policing? Why PCYC rather than, I don't know, murder squad or, whatever. And he put up with my 1,000 questions. I'm sure he was happy to see the end of me by the day. And then I spoke to the other people that were there as well, the other the office staff and the other policemen, the youth policemen, because I ran a refuge for street kids pre-Olympics. And so I met a lot of policemen within my work there, but it was different because we were working together and we had goals and stuff, and I wasn't like kind of able to ask them the questions. But I think the thing that really struck me is I wanted to write a character like they were, the policemen I dealt with, who overall were really genuine people trying to do their job the best they could, and they made mistakes just like I made mistakes. But and so that's kind of how Jessie sprang up. And then I read the newspaper and a lot of long form articles on current affairs issues, and they thread into my stories. So lots of research, but I love it, and I research psychology of character, and for this one with Geneva, it was psychology of shame and guilt, and how that can impact your behavior, because she's quite a contradictory character in many ways.
She is. And I think that she's a fabulously strong character as well. And I loved her loyalty, her dogged determination to find out what had happened to her sister, because I understood, anyone will understand that. But she's still trying to protect her niece and nephew, and her vulnerability with them and with Jessie. It made her such a well-rounded character. How did you come up with her? Is any of her you? That's what
there's that question. I don't know. She's definitely me in the sense that she's from my imagination. I adored writing Geneva. I set out knowing I wanted to write a very different character to Sarah from The Good Mother, because Sarah in The Good Mother is driven by fear and anxiety, and again, she's trying to protect her children, but she's got secrets in her past that really, she's got every reason to feel terrified. Whereas I didn't want Geneva I wanted Geneva to be this like powerful, resourceful, strong impulsive character, because I wanted to go on the ride with her. Like, I wanted to see what would happen. But then I also, we all have contradictions of character. So she is so tough and resourceful in every other aspect of her life, except when it comes to dealing with her brother-in-law, Hugh. And that was important to me, that I got a chance to, I wanted to explore that power dynamic and the fact that she is powerless in a situation. She adores her niece and nephew. She's their primary carer, but Hugh is their primary guardian. He has all the financial and legal power. And I guess I wanted to explore that because it's a chance for readers to kind of delve into that area of gaslighting and controlling behavior and stuff, but by using an aunt and her brother-in-law, it kind of makes it clearer in a way. And it's so easy to turn around and go, why doesn't she just leave? But because you're kind of getting to hear her thoughts, you're able to go, well, if she leaves, she's leaving two people that she loves more than anything with a man who's unraveling.
Yes.
Not much of a choice in that.
And I think too that, I mean, it's even though she tells them she's not their mother, she is in all respects their mother.
Yeah, Charlie was what, 9, 10 months old or something when
yeah, and you're not even, I mean, even her telling them that she's not their mother, it doesn't matter, because she does everything a mother does, and she loves them unconditionally, and she looks after them, and and she hugs them, and she cares about them. And so I think that even though she's their aunt, you can exactly see why she doesn't want to lose her family.
Yeah.
This is the only family she has.
Where she belongs.
Yeah, her sister is gone, and her mother's off gallivanting, and so really those children are the center of her world.
They are.
So I think that it's very similar in ways to grandparents who become ostracized and then can't see grandchildren. And I think that you did that extremely well, and it meant that everything that she did, even when it got really scary, she didn't care, because she was like, and the fact that she's an investigator, that she was a journalist, she was just like on that path, and she wasn't going to let it go. And I think that there comes a time when you're so far down the road to that journey that you just don't stop. You just keep going into.
You don't even see the side roads. You
don't see anything. Yes, and I think that that's how she came across to me. And I love that you wrote her in close third person, because we experienced everything that she did. And was that a conscious decision on your part?
Absolutely. I want it to feel to the reader like they're sitting on her shoulder, particularly because I am writing about an ordinary person in an extraordinary circumstance. I want the reader going, okay, she's in a real corner. What would I do here? How would I do this? But I want you kind of having her thought process, trying to understand. So you can't do that, get into that situation. She could just leave the kids with their dad. You understand the decision-making behind it. And it also, close third person, allows me to reveal the facts at the same time as to the reader, at the same time that the protagonist is finding them out, and that increases suspense and tension. And so yes, it's a very conscious decision. Even the fact that it's only from one point of view is a very conscious decision. So that you, as close as you can be to experiencing.
Yeah, without putting it in
journey.
Yes, no, I thought it was really masterfully done, and I felt that I felt immersed in her world at all times. Like when she's there, I'm there with her. And one of the things that you do extremely well is the way that you write scenery. And so I always, because I've been to Sydney, but I really don't know the suburbs or anything like that. And I really understood where everything was. It was, and especially when she goes to meet with the bikers and things like that, it's just little things that just place you there, and without overbearing the descriptions. And so I thought that was great. I really enjoyed that.
Can I tell you how much that means to me?
Because
honestly, my first draft, because I had to learn to write differently with this one. So between book 1 and book 2, I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis, which means I can't type for long periods. Well, my first book was handwritten, but I can't handwrite or type for long periods of time. So I actually had to use speech to text for my first draft. And so it ended up so dialogue heavy. And so I was having to really work on getting the setting through and make sure that that was communicated well enough. So I'm really pleased you've told me that. Thank you.
No, you're welcome. That's amazing that you use software to write this. That's incredible.
My neighbours think I'm nuts because I wander in my front room talking to myself.
But yeah, that is, I mean, it's hard enough to write a book with your fingers, let alone speak it, because I think that often when we type or when we write, a lot of it is subconscious.
Yep.
So, but when we speak, we're always conscious of what we're saying. We don't.
It was a real process of almost like rewiring my brain. So when I first started doing it, I remember going to my writing group and just almost in tears going, I can't do this. It's too hard. Because I even found handwriting different to typing.
Yes.
So, and still now, if I'm really struggling, I'll handwrite out part of a scene or something because it just seems to connect to a different part of my brain. But I had to train my brain to just, again, not have the critic going, just get it out. And it was only with the first draft, and then I had to, really go in and weave other things through it. But it was an interesting thing to learn. I'm really glad I've learned it, because otherwise I just wouldn't have been able to write another book.
Oh, this blows my mind, honestly, Rae, because the action scenes are so fast paced and they really ramped up in the climax. And I was so impressed with how you handled the action, because I felt like I was right in there and what was happening. Now, how did you do that with having to use voice recognition software? I mean, were you going along and going,
yes? So I have a degree in performing arts, and I think that threads into it a lot. So I don't so much act it out, but there is an element of that in it. And I am very visual. So the action scenes in particular, I see quite somatically in my mind, right down to almost camera angles kind of thinking. And then when I do look at it that way, so that you're kind of moving out and in and trying to place the reader in that, right in the center of the action. And then it's, I love writing the action scenes. I have to, with my first book, I had to learn to do more quiet scenes, because the very, very first time I wrote, I gave it to my mother and she said to me, there was no chance to breathe. And I went, oh, okay, yeah, all right, pull back. But that kind of happened much more easily in this book.
The action scenes are fabulous. And even though, it is quite an action driven book, especially in the second half, it has a really domestic beating heart. And I think that Jen's relationships are such an important part of the novel, like we've spoken about with her niece and nephew and her friend Tony, and her very complicated friendship with the policeman Jesse. And I think that you've given equal representation to these versus the action mystery part of the story, which is so cleverly done, because you never feel like one's taking away from the other. You feel that they all come together to tell a more rounded story. And so I think that's something you should really be proud of, the fact that you've brought in all these different little threads and you've managed to make this complete and exciting story that isn't just one thing.
No, thank you again. Look, I think that while I write kind of pacey action thrillers, they're described that way, they're actually very character driven. So the plot allows me to explore character and put them in hot water and see what they're really made of and what their relationships are really made of. And I love that part of it. I mean, I write because I want to understand why people do what they do. And so with each of the characters, when I'm writing them, it's very important that I know where they're coming from. And I think maybe that's a bit of my acting background as well. You always had to have a very clear objective, no matter, even if you were the tree in the corner, like it's just, you had to have that. And so it was important to me with each of the characters that even if I wouldn't behave that way, I needed to know why they were behaving that way. Because I guess going through the world each of the characters is the hero of their own story. They see everything from their perspective. So I love having lots of characters and having them complex, I guess.
Now, that leads very well into our next question, because you can't have a favourite child, but which character did you enjoy writing the most?
Oh, Geneva's just so much fun. I mean, honestly, she's everything I want to be in some ways. But I really enjoyed Geneva. But if I have to put her aside, I loved writing Charlie, the scenes with Charlie, because he's just so mischievous and good-hearted and full of life and joy, and for all that he's been through. I just want to give him a hug. And then I loved writing Tony, because Tony says it how it is, but from a place of love, which I don't know about you, but that's what most of my best friends are like. And life wouldn't be the same if they weren't in my life. And I even enjoyed writing Hugh, just trying to understand where he was coming from and what drove his decisions. I mean, So,
I mean, sometimes, especially with Hugh, I mean, sometimes some of the things he says are true. I mean, it's not like he's a villain. I mean, very often where he's coming from and how he's seeing things, he's actually saying, well, this happened because you did this, so maybe you should stop doing that. And you can understand too that, that especially when you get to the end and you understand everything that's gone along until that moment, that not everything that he does is unreasonable in his situation.
You still want to throttle him.
Yeah. All right.
But that's the thing, and that's important to know, I think, as a writer. I think if you just write a mustache twirling villain on the page, it's boring.
It is, yes.
Because there aren't really many people you come across like that in life.
No, there's not. And the side characters were great, and Mac, all his smart ass comments, and and like he genuinely made my skin crawl. You could just imagine this really tall, big bloke saying these things, and you'd be like, I'm one of those people that, like, I get, like, if somebody says something to you and it's really cheeky, sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't know what to say now.
Yeah. Well, that was, I wanted that.
Yeah.
That it's a different way of relating with people.
Yes, and that was really good. And and you're right, Charlie's such a gorgeous little character, and I love how you made him. He was genuinely kind, he was loving, but he was like the moral heart of the story. Because and the interactions between him and Jen were more like mother and son, and it was just so beautiful.
Oh, thank you. I did. I really loved writing those scenes, and that they tease each other, but it's in a really loving way.
Yeah. If Dying to Know was picked up for a screen adaptation, and it would be so good. Who would you want to play Geneva?
Look, do you know who I picture? And it's impossible to do, but it's a young Toni Collette.
Oh, yes.
She'd be like perfect. And I don't know an Australian actress that I could put in to play, like, that would be equivalent of her, but that kind of energy that she has, that vulnerability and honesty, I think she'd be amazing.
She would be. Oh, maybe we'll just age her up a bit.
Yeah.
Now, for all our writers listening out there, I think I know the answer to this. Are you a plotter or a pantser?
I'm a total pantser. I would love to be a plotter. That said, like I said, I do a lot of research and a lot of reading, and it's like, in doing all that, my subconscious brings it together. And so I sit down to write. I write in chronological order and kind of discover the things, the threads as it happens. And I love that. It's so much fun and it's exciting. And I run out to my husband and go, "You'll never believe what happened today." And he'll go, "What do you mean? That makes no sense." But it's, yeah, it just keep on making things worse for them, but making sure their characters are behaving, you know, in the way that you would expect them to. But yeah, I love that part of the process, the discovery. I figure if I don't know what's happening, neither does the reader.
I think that too, that, your subconscious works in very strange ways, as we know. And so to say, yes, guess what happened? It really is, guess what happened? I did not know that was coming type thing.
But it does these amazing things. Like it lays down these little trails. So when I went back to look at the trails there, I'm not tricking the reader and like doing a reveal and there's nothing there earlier. And your brain's kind of planted these little things and you go, how did that happen? I don't. And then you've got to finesse some of them and the rest. But it is astonishing if you will give over to your subconscious and just kind of run with it.
That's fabulous. Now, you have such an interesting journey to publication, and for those who are listening that don't know, Rae's the Good Mother. She self-published this, and then you were shortlisted for the Ned Kelly, and you picked up a traditional deal, a traditional publishing deal. I mean, are you the only person that's ever happened to? You and Matthew Riley, I think.
Matthew Riley did it too. Now, look, there are a few, and it happens in different ways for different people. For me, it was a very topsy-turvy publishing journey. I think I said before, it took me 5 years to write it. I did a year-long mentorship with Catherine Hayman. From that, I got an agent. The agent put it out. No one was interested. And so I took the manuscript back and reworked it. I knew it needed more work and got more feedback, and then got another agent from that. And then I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis. So that kind of put a spanner in the whole works. It was about 2 years where I couldn't speak a sentence, let alone write one. So once we sorted out the medication, I went back and I said to her, "Right, I'm ready to run again." And she said, "I'm so sorry, I'm closing my agency." And it was that point that I went, "No, I'm going to self-publish." Well, no, I didn't. I went, "Oh," and everybody, my friends and mentors and peers, the writing community is amazing. And they really rallied around me and said, "This is a story worth telling. You can do this." And so I treated it, I wanted it to be able to sit on a shelf and look like a traditionally published book, to read like a traditionally published book. So I had it professionally cover designed. I had it professionally edited. And so I did a year's work on that and learning how to do self-publishing and all that, put it out in December 2020. And then I was really happy. I managed to get people beyond the people I knew reading it, which was astonishing. There was some amazing support from a couple of libraries and podcasters and stuff. I was very blessed, very lucky. And then in February 2021, I got a message from Belinda Audiobook Publishing, and a vision impaired lady had sent them my book. And from that, they offered me an audiobook contract. So that was my first traditional contract. And I was like, yeah, I'm hybrid now. I'm happy with this. I'll move on to the next one. And then in the June of that year, 2021, I was shortlisted for the Best Debut Ned Kelly. And that blew me out of the water. I didn't even know that could happen to a self-published book. I think I don't actually remember entering it, but it had to be me. So obviously just did it and didn't think another thing about it. And I certainly never thought a self-published book could get shortlisted, but it changed my life. So 2 weeks later, I had another agent, and a week after that, I had the 2-week publishing contract with HarperCollins, two book contract, sorry. So I did keep working the whole time. And there are 1,000,001 drafts of that book. But it was, and then I even redrafted again with HarperCollins just to kind of make it for an even broader audience. So I wrote another 10,000 words for that and took out 5,000. I think that's right. Right around. Yeah. So I was very fortunate in some ways, But I think the main thing I was fortunate with was the support team around me just kept on buoying me up.
It's such a fabulous publication story. I don't think anyone's got one, quite like yours. And and it gives me such great joy to hear it, because I think that probably your advice would be, don't give up and just, back yourself.
It would also be seek and embrace feedback, but genuinely embrace it, because
great advice.
A lot of people are like, oh, my first book, how did you get your first one done? I've got one in the drawers. But I knew the story was there. I just needed to learn how to write. And I had to learn from people who knew what they were doing. So when I say seek feedback, I don't mean from your gorgeous friends and family. I mean from people who know more than you do about writing, and just keep on doing it. As hard as it is to keep facing the manuscript over and over again, it was worth doing. But I knew that I had a story there that was worth telling.
That's great advice, because I think that, surrounding yourself with people who are going to tell you the truth is what you need to hear.
Absolutely. But in a constructive way.
Yes, who know what they're doing. It's no good somebody telling you, oh, I didn't like this. And then you're like, well, yeah, what can I do to make that better? And they have nothing. But I think that writing a book is like any kind of art. It comes from a very personal place. And so it's often hard to hear when people say, well, really, that's not the best that you could have done with that scene. You need to do this. And you just have to, it's sad, but you just have to harden up, and you have to accept that there are people out there who know more than you about this, and that you need to take advice. You don't need to take all the advice, but you
need to consider every piece of advice, though. And what I would suggest is, if it's something you really struggle with, sleep on it. Because it's amazing how when you sleep on it, the emotion goes out of it, and then you're able to go, right, I get what they're saying. And they are 100%, 99% of the time. I mean, occasionally something will come out and you go, no, I that's a decision I've made. So I guess with that feedback, if you're rejecting it, you need to be doing it for a very clear decision, as opposed to an emotional reaction.
Yeah, no, great advice, Rae. Now, for all our readers out there, can you recommend a book by an Australian author that you've read recently and would recommend? And you can have more than one.
Well, I have. So I've read this recently, The Unbelieved by Vicky Petratus. I think that's how you say it. I feel terrible not knowing how to say that. It's an extraordinary book about women in a small town who are not believed when they're put in when they're abused, essentially. But I'm making that sound not very powerful, but it's really powerfully written. It's the women's journey to learning their power and coming together as a bond of women and not being victims. I really like her way of viewing character, that a crime has happened to them, but they're not victims. Because I think in a lot of crime writing, sometimes it can come across that way. One of the joys of being a traditionally published author is getting ARC, so advanced reader copies. And so this is Black Lies by Mercedes Mercier, and it's the second in her Dr. Laura Fleming series. Dr. Laura Fleming's a prison psychologist. The first book was White Noise. It came out last year in June, and this one's coming out in June. And this time it's Laura has been called in because the most notorious criminal in this system has just been diagnosed with terminal cancer, and she's sent in to try and find out the location of his victim's body so that the family can have some answers. But as she interviews him, she starts to realize things aren't as they seem, and there are people that want to keep the past as the past. So it's just, again, it's an interesting perspective for a crime novel, because it is a prison psychologist, and it's that wits, in competition with each other. So and Laura has such a full-rounded character. She's not just a prison psychologist. Her home life has a whole lots of layers. So yes, thoroughly recommend that, coming out in June.
Fabulous. Mercedes actually our June reading by
Oh, that's right.
Candlelight, author, and so that's really exciting to hear that how fabulous that you think it is. It's my next book that I'm reading. So
She's going from strength to strength as a writer, I think. Yeah.
it's fabulous. Thank you for those. They're wonderful recommendations. Now, Rae, what are you currently writing? Are you able to tell us anything?
And it's another standalone thriller. And it's kind of a cross between Jodi Picoult's 19 Minutes and the movie The Fugitive, but with a
Oh,
female
wow.
lead. So,
Wow.
yeah.
Yeah, 19 Minutes is a really full-on novel. My goodness.
It is, and it's not going into the school shooting kind of thing. It's more about the insidious influence of that can come in through gaming.
Yeah, okay.
Into young, particularly boys' lives, and how they're actively targeting them to get them involved in other things.
Yeah,
so
that'd
mother's
be
trying
really
to stop that, but she at the same time ends up accused of a crime.
Oh,
Is
wow.
trying to outrun the police to stop her son from doing something.
Now, is this another year project? So
Yeah, look, I'm hoping it'll be 2024. Yeah, but we'll see.
excellent. That's great. Not too long to wait then. Want to say congratulations, Rae. This is a high adrenaline ride of a story. There's not only some great twists in it, but at the center, I think it's just this genuinely moving story about a family breaking down. And so it's got a perfect mix of character and action, and you receive so much support from established crime authors who have endorsed this book. I mean,
I know, I couldn't believe it.
Oh my goodness. I mean,
I cried when they came in.
Yeah. Sarah Bailey, you got the gorgeous Chris Hammer.
Yeah.
And and on the back, just wonderful, wonderful endorsements. And I think that it's all well deserved, because I could visualize every scene, and you put me in there with Jen. And I think that you should be very proud of this book.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me on and for your feedback. And yeah, it's great.
And so on behalf of Reading by Candlelight at Molly's Cottage, I want to thank you for being a special guest, because you're our first ever special guest. We've never had on our little podcast today. And it's such a delight to talk to you about Dying to Know. And I recommend it to everyone listening. And Rae's first book, if you haven't read that yet either, why haven't you? It's such a thrilling ride, and it's going to just from the prologue to the action-packed end, I'm sure that everyone's going to enjoy it as much as I did, because it's really hard to put down. It's a fabulous read. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Rae. And
thanks so much for having me.
All the best with this and with your future book.
Thank you so much. Lovely to be here.